So hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Reed. I'm the Learning Officer for the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. We also have Sarah Easley with us, a center staff assisting us with chat and text. We are delighted today to have you join us for preparing for and managing change in an evolving world in partnership with Ashley Schrader, who's with Two Sons Consulting. Before we get started with that, just a brief info into the center for those of you who are not familiar. Our mission is to educate, connect, and advocate for North Carolina nonprofits. It is important to the center to assist nonprofits to build organizational practices that addresses the nonprofit leadership gap while lifting up the equity, diversity, and inclusion in all North Carolina nonprofits. Before I hand it back over to Ashley, again, just a few housekeeping items. Yes, today's webinar will be recorded and a wraparound email will go out with the recording and resources referenced in the webinar. Please use the chat box for any questions that you may have as we go through it. We will be monitoring it. And at the end, you'll also receive a post-session survey as well. In the chat, we'll be placing Ashley's bio for you to reference as we go through the presentation today, or if you want to get in contact with Ashley, all of her information will be in there. So thank you again for joining. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for being with me today. I'm really excited to sit with you all and spend some time together. Again, my name's Ashley, and I guide individuals and organizations who are going through transformational experience. So this conversation today is very timely, and I appreciate you setting aside your busy worlds and lives to sit with me. I like to meet folks at what I say is the intersection of emotion and logic, that something needs to change, but you aren't sure what. So this unfolds as organizational consulting, professional development, and personal growth. I have brown hair with some very well-earned gray highlights that I am proud of and some hazel eyes. I'm a Caucasian female and I do use she, her pronouns, and I'm wearing a black sweater with the Two Sons logo. I'm hailing to you today from Montana, but we are headed to Asheville, North Carolina in 2 months, where we closed on a property 6 days before Helene. So I am really excited to be a part of this amazing state soon. And thank you again deeply for spending some time with me today. What I thought we would do first is just take a moment to center. So we all have busy days and busy lives, and just taking a moment to take a deep breath. You're welcome to close your eyes, but focusing on the present moment and the gift that you've given yourself today to sit together, to provide a learning opportunity, but also a connection opportunity with others. So feel free to just center yourself, maybe quiet your phone or remove any distractions, and sort of step into that present moment with me. Great. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and the story behind my resume, which you can pull from the website. I'm a first-generation college graduate and I'm an AmeriCorps alumni. And somehow in the midst of 20 plus years and multi-sector experience, I went back to school to get my master's degree in organizational leadership. And I did a focus on change management and innovation. And I did that when my oldest was just 3 years old. My purpose in this lifetime really is to remember who I am, reclaim my power and heal, and then through contrast and live experience, define the life that I desire. By stepping into that place of thriving, that's when I developed Two Sons Consulting. So it is a love story to my 2 boys, and really all 3 boys, as you can see their pictures posted there. And the vision was to be able to serve others with passion, teach skills through lived experience, fold in the highest level of education and certifications, but it also provides me the flexibility and the freedom that I desire to be a mother and the mother that I'd really like to be. So today's training is a 6-part training series that I've started putting together to really answer the call of the times to help reclaim your power and create a life that's desired. So if that's of interest to you, please be sure to reach out. Otherwise, again, it's my distinct pleasure to be your trainer and facilitator today. So I'm excited to get started with you. Our learning objectives today, or our goals of what we'd like to accomplish, are to spend a little bit of time reviewing some change management theories. So there is a lot of research and a lot of theoretical concepts out there that we'll touch on today. And then we're going to translate that into really identifying 3 critical focus areas for change. Unfolding for that is we're really going to put the meat to the bones and create a toolbox for change. And I want to make sure that there's going to be some time for some networking and sharing with others your bright spots and some time for processing and conversation. We'll conclude today, and I'm going to keep a close eye on time because I really want to make sure that we have time to get to the newly added component of this training, which is tips for navigating change during uncertainty or when there's little to no time for preparation. So I did come up with just a few learning norms, but we'd love to hear from you. If you are able and comfortable sharing your video, that would be wonderful. So I could see your faces and feel engaged with you. There's going to be some opportunity for some sharing. So participation is really going to help maximize the experience. Group sharing is allotted for different experiences and perspectives. So if you're willing to share courageously and listen generously, that's going to really enhance our experience together today. I'd like to ask that any stories that are shared kind of stay in this present space, but any learning that is given can be freely shared outwardly. And then if you are able to remove any distractions that can support others, that would be wonderful as well. And are there any other further groups on from the group on how you'd like to spend your day together? Any other kind of group agreements? Or thumbs up, does everyone feel good operating with these? Yay, there's my fireworks. Okay, great. All right, so with that being said, if you would like to share with me, or you can jot it down introspectively on a piece of paper if you have that in front of you, what are you most excited to learn about and what do you hope to receive as part of this training? So that helps me answer the call from you of what brought you forth today and what are you hoping to walk away with. So any volunteers just for a minute or two of what you're hoping to receive or learn about, or you're welcome to drop some in the chat box as well. Shared learning targets. Awesome. So excited to learn about how to quickly adapt to change. Fantastic. Any others?
I have a HR role, so trying to support staff through change.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Well, feel free to plop a couple more of those in the chat box as we get started, or maybe you reflect on your own. I will take you at the end of the training to make sure that we met what you were hoping to achieve from our time together. Right, so we're going to do a little bit of a fun warm up. And in the chat box, so everybody can see, what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word change? So curious to hear from you. What is sort of the first thing that pops up into your head when you see that? Turbulence. Okay, good. Others. Awesome.
Exciting chaos.
Uncertainty. Yeah. Fear.
Scary.
Great.
Resistance. Interesting.
Opportunity. Love that. Okay. So what we have to ask ourselves, right, is like, does change have a bad reputation? So if we went through sort of all of these reactions, how many of those would be sort of fear-based or lend themselves to a fear mindset? So change can often, bring up feelings of self-doubt or leaving the comfort zone, or maybe you're concerned about how it's going to upset others. There's most certainly a fear of failure that can also coincide with a fear of success. So when we talk about change, I think it's important to sort of acknowledge that right off the bat, that oftentimes it can bring up these feelings of fear or uncertainty. And it doesn't have to, though, because one thing is constant, change will always be occurring, but it can be a good thing. So it can be a great thing when it's evolutionary, when it supports and accelerates work, when it aligns with your vision and mission, and when it includes everyone. So we're going to really spend some time together today talking about how we can translate change into working for us instead of working against us. Right. So we're going to transition and spend just a little bit of time reviewing some change management theories. I picked two of my favorite, and then I have a list of them that you'll get in the slide deck, because you could spend a whole master's degree studying change management theories, right? So I want to make sure to honor our time today. The first one was developed by Current Lewin, developed in the 1950s. And it's really the unfreeze, change, and refreeze sort of concepts. And the first piece of that unfreezing is that this is when there should really be an opportunity for preparation, to really analyze things. It's when you're really looking at things of building your case and being able to communicate. So in an ideal world, there should be sort of this concept of unfreezing where things are at and having a preparatory period. Then there's the actual change itself. And this is when you implement the components that you've determined, that you're providing support, that you're keeping that constant communication, and all of that change goes into practice. The third concept is that there should be another iteration, which is to refreeze that and to avoid falling back, to make sure that the change is actually being accomplished, that there's opportunity to review and measure whether or not those impacts are being effective, and then to create any adjustments from there. And that for all intents and purposes, you should continue to move through that cycle of unfreeze, change, refreeze, and then repeat once more. Okay. So the next concept here is John Kotter. It was developed by a Harvard professor in the 90s. He went back and re-updated that in 2014, but it's an 8-step change model. And the first one is to really start with like a sense of urgency of that this change is necessary and should be occurring immediately in order to help develop a really powerful narrative around that. The second piece of that is to build a coalition. So to really talk about how to develop passion and a diverse group that's going to support concepts of that change. The third component is the vision setting, right? So what is this change going to set out to achieve? How are we going to manage the feelings and the goals that are associated with that? The fourth pie piece here is to communicate that vision. So once you've really clearly defined it, to be able to share it with others in order to generate support and understanding. The fifth piece is to really empower others to act. So this is when we're going to really define, we're going to plan, we're going to carry out the change and ignite that in others. The sixth concept here is to really focus on the short-term wins. And we're going to talk about this today. I call it focusing on your bright spots. But to really enable those and promote those short-term wins across the organization. The seventh piece of that is to consolidate all of that. So to make sure that all of the momentum and all of that work is collaboratively coming together. And then the 8th step would be to be able to anchor that change to where the culture, the systems, and the processes are all sticking in order to support what it was that was adjusted or pivoted. So this is a reference list for you. Let me go back. These are some of my favorite change management theories. So in all of your like robust leisure free time, you can dive into these and sort of, it's fun to kind of cross compare the different concepts or the different philosophies that people have come up with on how to manage change. All right, so let's break this down to really 3 critical focus areas for change today, because that's going to guide all of our conversations and our tips and action steps for how to manage change. So there's really 3 different content areas. It is, or 3 focus areas. The first one of those is content. The third one of those is people, or the second one's people, and the third one is process. And I'm going to break down for you each one of these, what we mean when we say that. So be thinking through that, because at the end of it, I'm going to ask, which one of these do you think is the hardest to manage? All right, so the first one is content for a critical focus area. So this is really where we want to be looking at the structure of an organization, the business process. We want to be analyzing the technology that's in place that's going to be supporting that. We're going to take a look at the programs and the services that are being offered. What are all of those systems in place? Is there efficiency or opportunity to create efficiency? And then what are the guiding priorities for the organization that are driving the strategy of the organization? So I really want you to think of content as the true infrastructure and foundational pieces that come into place that have to be considered when we look at managing change. The second one is going to be people. So this is really where we're going to look at engagement, commitment, participation, really assessing people's feelings and their mindsets about change, what norms or influences are in place that could affect people in regards to change, what relationships are in place, are there motivations? Certainly in today's climate, there's politics at play, and just a behavior and a readiness for change. So these are all sort of areas that have to be considered when we look at change management practices and tips and tools. Okay, next is going to be process. So the way I really want you to think about process is it's how to plan the content with the people. So we're going to look at opportunity for not only change design, but how are you doing decision makings? Where are there opportunities for course corrections? How are you implementing the change? And how are you doing the content planning alongside of it? So it's sort of the well-defined steps that are going to go alongside the content and the people. So question for you, what do you think is the most difficult to address? So feel free to just popcorn out, or you can put it in the chat box.
People.
Yeah. Any others? People, people, people. Anybody think it's not people? Yeah, okay, no one wants to be like that brave person. I will say over and over and over again, people always comes up as what is the most difficult to address when we consider change. No right or wrong answer, just something to reflect about when we think about the tools and techniques that we can move forward and put into place. So let's think about creating your toolbox for change, okay? All right, so we're gonna focus on content first. So if you can kind of go back to that mindset. The first thing we wanna do is how to identify what needs to be changed. So where are things getting sticky? Where is there opportunity for efficiency and effectiveness? Really, are things outdated and it's time to update them and reevaluate them? Certainly in today's changing world, that seems more relevant and something to stay on top of. And then where can we align that with data and staff feedback? So our action item here is to really think about collecting any data that you have currently in place or any data that you need to make sure that it actually supports the decision for change. And we're going to talk about how to put that data into place. But this is a first action step to sort of start thinking about what information or feedback do we have and do we need to gather in order to support the justification or the rationale for change. All right, so next kind of piece of this is to make change start a part of the strategic plan. So if you haven't already, there's some really great decision-making tools or strategic filtering processes that you can come into creation with. But how do you make sure that the change is aligned with the vision and mission? And is this directly supporting the goals and the objectives of the organization that you have set out with intention to do to make sure that you're staying mission focused? So our action step there is to make sure to update your strategic plan with your change initiatives included, if you are able to do so, or if you're in the next iterative process of strategic planning. All right, next focus area for content is to involve every layer. So this is really, we're going to focus more deeply on people, but this is really setting out for the intention for early engagement, making sure that you're involving your employees, and that leadership is a coach and a guide, and not necessarily authoritarian for the process on how every layer within the organizational structure or the people or the community that you serve is going to be involved as part of that. And making sure that there's space for conversation and for feedback is really important when we start thinking about involving every layer. So our next little action step to add to our toolbox is to really look at ways to bring together a change management work group. Ideally, this work group should be really diverse in its representation. It should adequately reflect the work and the people of your organization to make sure that we're putting into place things that set up success for feedback loops. All right, so we're going to transition over to people. The biggest thing here is going to keep in mind, how do we lead with culture? So as part of developing that work group or that collaborative committee that's going to come together, how do we really take a look at what is the employee perspective? How are we bringing together those voices? And what is it that they are telling us? Especially in the design process for change, it's really important to honor the emotional connection. It's also really important to look at where are there social norms in place for the organization so that those can be taken into account, especially when we talk about our messaging and our marketing. So your action step for people is to really look at ways to identify the social norms of the organization, to well define the culture, to really determine and clarify and align with the values of the organization, and to honor those different perspectives. And you want to roll that into part of your process of change management planning. All right. Finding your change management champions. This is different than formulating some type of a work group or committee. Okay? Those people could be one and of the same, and that would be great if you could do that or are able to do that. But you're really looking for volunteers that lead outside, that are you're avoiding signing this role. So you're looking for people who sort of want to step up, who believe in the change or the pivots that are occurring. They're really your pride builders, and they're truly culture ambassadors. So your action step here is to look for 2 informal leaders. Those can be volunteers, those can be people that are working with your organization, those could be board members, but just adding them to that change management work group, and for thinking of ways for them to have actionable steps to support, to evaluate, and to lead the process as you go along. All right. When we reflect on people and the concept of managing change with people, it's really important to understand that it starts internally first. And oftentimes the first step of that is to accept the change yourself. So don't be, afraid to try to step into a place of being confident in your decision for change, or confident in the processes and the information that you've gathered in order to determine what that change is going to be. Oftentimes, if we find ourselves in a position where we're communicating the change and we're reflecting fear or uncertainty, that's going to feed more fear and uncertainty, which is natural. But the more that we can find ourselves being in a place of preparation or letting people know that you're putting together a plan, can kind of help build some of that confidence and make them feel like they're in good hands and they're going to be included as part of those conversations. It's also really important too to make sure that your pre-communication first is sort of developed and tested and reviewed, and some feedback is gathered before that's disseminated outwardly to the masses. So just make sure to kind of test your communication plan and see how it's going to be received and if it's going to fit the culture And a great way to do that is to use that work group or that committee that I've talked about putting together to say, okay, this is how we're thinking of sharing the adjustments that we're going to be making. How does that feel to you? How does that perceived? Are you hearing what it is that we're trying to share? So your action steps here are to really show that you are prepared and that you own the change, and to use your work group to review and to be able to provide some of that feedback for you before you put it on a large scale. All right, next with people is to really look at your launching your communications. So it's really important to acknowledge that your rationale and your emotions go together. So people respond to calls of action that really engage the heart and engage the mind. So the one thing that we coach a lot with communication is it should always be consistent, right? So where fear or anxiety or panic starts to ignite is oftentimes where people can see gaps or holes in the communication, where it's like, I heard one thing, but then now I heard this thing and I can't decipher what's the truth anymore. So that's why it's really important to sort of test your pre-communication plan and then stick with the consistency of it to make sure that you're minimizing any opportunity for loopholes. So your action step here is to make sure, again, that you're using the work group to help inform that communication strategy and that you're continuing to be mindful of the messaging and the marketing that you're putting outwards about the change that you're experiencing to make sure that you're, considering the rational and emotional. Okay, so we're going to transition to process now, which, as a reminder, is how you manage your content and your people. So it's really important here to start at the top. Have a really committed and well-aligned group of leaders if you can and you're able to, and develop a really solid change management plan. So if you've never done change management planning, you want to make sure that you're tracking on your progress and adjustments, that your tasks are really clear, that who's responsible for those tasks are really clear, and then you're continuing to monitor and update that. So it's really important that your leaders agree about the decision-making that is unfolding and to adjust if needed, if there's really a strong consensus that perhaps this isn't the right direction to go, or if the change that is occurring perhaps is not unfolding the way that you were planning for in the first place. So again, make sure that you're tracking your progress, you're creating your plan, and that the leaders, as much as possible who are deriving the decision in regards to the plan, have strong consensus. All right, so I am sort of like a program eval data geek, and I think that data and information can really give us a variety of insights profoundly for a bunch of different areas of work. So I really encourage interviews and surveys as part of your engagement, as part of your change management plan, to create the feedback loops and to list and act on what it is you're hearing and what it is you're finding as part of that engagement strategy. But implementing some type of an interview or a survey is only going to be as effective as you as an organization are willing to maybe assess and adapt that information. So just be willing to sort of acknowledge that if we're hearing some things that aren't working, we're going to willingly adjust and start thinking differently about where there might be opportunities to pivot. So as much as possible, use your best practice data collection methods to track your outcomes would be an action step here, and to really make sure to adjust the process if data indicates that you have some modifications that are necessary. And as much as possible, even while you're trying to manage your change management plan, keep the change fluid, because as we know, things are adjusting and pivoting and changing quite frequently and consistently. So it's just really important to keep things fluid and not make everything sort of set in stone. My other little piece of this is to be willing to think outside of the box. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about uncertainty. But just starting to also look at where are there opportunities to think differently based upon the data and the information that you're having. Is there opportunity for innovation? Is there opportunity for deeper partnerships? Is there opportunity to maybe start thinking strategically about how we're doing the work? So it's a great part of the process to start thinking differently. All right, so the next piece of this is to start looking at where are there some formal solutions. So behavior change in and of itself isn't enough. And so looking at different ways of, are there places of structure or reward systems or the way that we're operating as a nonprofit that we can start to leverage some solutions. That can look in a variety of different ways. Providing training and development is one of those, as well as maybe some incentives or some new opportunities. Are there growth opportunities? So understanding what motivates your people and your tribe and who you're working with is a great way to start thinking about how some formal solutions can be leveraged. Your action step here is maybe to look at implementing some type of support or reward system or professional development to support the training or the change that you're going through, and to really understand what it is that's going to motivate others to get on board with the direction that you're headed. And a great place to go back to for some feedback and input about what those might be is to use the work group that was created. All right, this is my favorite one, and I'm going to prep you because I'd really love to have a group discussion, because I think this is where we're going to find the opportunity to connect with one another, is to think about ways to find the bright spots. And when we talk about finding the bright spots, it's really thinking about what is working and being solutions focused, and looking at how to repeat what it is that's working. Your employees that we've talked about activating are a great place as your change agents to start having this conversation. So instead of focusing our time a lot on what isn't working, we're going to really focus on what are some things that are happening that are working that we can replicate, duplicate, and share outwards. So your action step here is to really identify what is working, have your informal and your former leaders find opportunities to share and to mentor and to train others with those bright spots, so that you can build on what it is that's being successful. And again, you're probably going to get tired of me saying this today, but make sure that what is working is tracked as part of the data and the metrics in the change management plan. Because what you want to be able to do is to back up what it is that you're hearing is being a bright spot with any data or metrics that you might be collecting along the way. So I'd love to just give everyone an opportunity to process. If we were in person, I'd open this up for, a nice table discussion, but I'd love to hear from you. And I think is great knowledge with everyone online today about what is a change that your organization has made within the last 2 years, or it could even be within the last year, and identify a bright spot from that change. And if you'd be willing to maybe share with the others, how can this be replicated, or what were some of the lessons learned from that? And if you want to trace that back to our 3 focus areas, that's great too. So any brave and courageous volunteers? Anyone? Any bright spots? Yeah, I think I see a hand up. No,
Oh,
maybe.
I have one.
Yeah.
I know my hand isn't raised, but so I work at Goodwill and we provide workshops to a lot of participants, for job readiness services. But especially since COVID, we've just seen less and less people coming to those workshops. And low attendance. So we started a change that our trainers did was they started going into other like partner nonprofits and offering our job readiness workshops at their locations as part of their programs. And it ended up a bright spot from that is it's really increased our relationship strength with a lot of nonprofits in the area. And we've been seen as more of like a go-to place for any nonprofit, like leadership training and things of that nature because of those relationships that we've built through our trainers for other nonprofits participants.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
Any others? I know I see a hand up in the corner.
I don't know if it's mine, but I had my hand up. One change that our organization has made is previously we were open to a multitude of funding, whether it was state, federal, philanthropic. And over the past 2 years, we have become much more strategic about applying for funding. We're setting a process in applying for that funding. So the bright spot for that change is that our funders eventually are becoming more aligned with the work that we do, as well as we're not chasing after dollars versus those dollars fit into the work that we're already doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Any others from the group on some sort of positive and solutions-oriented reflection on some bright spots? Okay. Thank you for the brave souls sharing with us today. And I'm happy to give an example that's unfolded from our particular work, but we're definitely seeing an opportunity for some deeper partnerships and some collaboration. So despite the things that are coming down the pipeline, it's really opened up an opportunity for conversation and collaboration and a removal of what I would sort of coin as duplication, to make sure that we are consolidated and unified in our efforts and programs and services in more of a collective way. So, all right. So here's where we're going to really dive into, just so you know, this training was like originally developed coming out of COVID. And what I did was I went back to the table and I went, okay, what are some things that we learned from that experience? But that's very like proactive. So that's when we have like time to think about change. That's when we have time to plan for change. That's when we have the capacity for people to be able to be a part of those conversations, or we have the systems in place to collect the data and the information that we're seeking. So we're going to really spend the rest of our time today on talking about some tips for navigating change during uncertainty, or when there's no time for preparation, because let's be honest, a good majority of the time that we're facing change is during when there is uncertainty, or when you have very little time to be more preparatory. So we're going to break this down on the organizational level, and we're going to break this down on the individual level. So maybe just like sort of start thinking about those in two different ways. The first piece of this is going to be for organizations. So the first kind of helpful tip is to think about how and where is there opportunity to be flexible and to be adaptable. So really looking at, is there opportunity for new ways and new ideas of thinking of things? The thing that change does do is it opens up the innovation box, and to start thinking about what are some opportunities there that might give us some insight as to a different way or a new way of doing things. This is a big one too, which is to think about learning from success and failures. So has there been opportunity to sort of reflect on not only the bright spots, but also the learning opportunities that may have occurred with some failures or some challenges? And where has that information been gathered and collected to determine the new ideas and the new approaches that can be informed from that? So thinking about ways to put into some place a little bit of opportunity to discuss, what is working. And if you're having conversations on discussion of what isn't working, making sure that it's sort of guided or directed as to where is what we call like a significant learning opportunity from that in order to be able to try new ideas, approaches, and innovate. It also can give you a little bit of a leg up to think about how to stay ahead in the game and to identify where there's opportunity. The last kind of tidbit here is to think about how to review and evaluate strategy. So if you haven't already, taking a look at what plans do you have in place, where is there opportunity for adjustments? This is most certainly my personal opinion, but I do think long-range strategic planning is very difficult right now to put into place and to monitor. So how is there opportunity to sort of look at what are the priorities, what are the goals and objectives of the organization, and do we need to be rethinking about those to allow some adjustments in order to determine how we're going to move forward and move ahead? Okay, the next piece of this, right, for organizations is to think about where is there opportunity for empathy. And I think that oftentimes just starts acknowledging that there may be some emotions that have surfaced, that there are some concerns and some fears, and to really validate any of those anxieties or worries that might be in place in order to open up or soften the opportunity to have some of those conversations about future direction. The other piece is to really think about like your clear vision. So if you haven't thought about your vision or how that's being communicated or what information was gathered in order to formulate your vision statement, it's a really nice time to make sure that all of the decisions you're making in regards to future direction or change are in alignment with your mission and your vision of the organization. All right, solid decision making. So transparency and how you are making decisions, how that's being unfolded, and how people are involved in that process is more important, in my opinion, now than ever. And making sure that those decision-making processes are aligned with the strategy and the vision and the mission of the organization. There's some really great state-of-the-art and new innovative tools that can support decision-making processes so that it gives that opportunity for involvement and transparency. So looking into those could be helpful so that way others understand how future direction is being determined. I can't say this enough, but communicate, communicate, communicate. So consistent communication, regular communication, different methods of communication right now is very important. And it's very key during times of uncertainty to make sure that that's regularly occurring and that information and that feedback loop is occurring through multiple different collection methods to help inform the communication strategy and to keep it strong and to make sure that it's, for the most part, being well received. All right. This is one that I admittedly myself have been working and practicing a lot, is just to acknowledge that these are uncertain times and to really anticipate that there are going to be continued challenges and to be continued opportunity that unfolds from that. And as part of that, how can we look at ways to regularly scan the environment? And to say, okay, where are there entry points? Where are there strategy adjustments? Where are there partnerships that could be taking place? Where are there ways to maybe think about different models of business that might help support our mission and vision and programs and services? And a lot of the times that can just start as an organization by acknowledging this is the place that we're in. These are the things that we're seeing. And we're really trying to the best of our abilities, anticipate some of these opportunities and challenges. Another great way to do that is to stay up to date on trends and be really proactive. I'm going to make an assumption that most people on the call today are probably following the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits regular newsletter. The National Nonprofit Association also has a great newsletter that's coming out on a weekly basis. And these really dedicated staff have done an amazing job tracking all of the adjustments and changes and policies that are coming down the line so that you can stay up to date. This is a big one too, which is about thinking about what is within the element of your control. And we talk a lot about this even just as a family and with our kids right now, is to thinking about you really only have a sphere of influence in which there are actionable items that you can take in how you show up into the world. And so thinking about how do we focus on the things that are in an element of my personal control and trying to really make sure that you are giving your priorities and your energy to things that are within that sphere of influence. So this takes a little bit of dedication for a level of self-awareness for an organization of when you are making sure to prioritize resources and capacity, that you're staying within your sphere of influence to make sure that you're actually focusing on the aspects of what can be changed. All right. If I have any Simon Sinek fans in the room, give me like a shout out or a raise of hands. But starting with the why and explaining the why is one of my favorite leadership concepts, which is to really give the reason why the change is happening, not just what is happening. And that way you can offer transparency, even if it's complete. People want to know why it's happening, not just what and how that's going to unfold for them. And so if you can help explain the why, it just helps to garner some of that support and collaboration on a more meaningful and deeper level. So these are your action steps to add back into a toolbox that we've already developed for when you have time to prepare for change. The first one is to really clearly define your vision, your mission, and your core values. So if there is an opportunity for you to reevaluate, reassess, redefine, wordsmith, whatever that looks like, make sure what you do, how you do it, who you're doing it for, and why you're doing it is extremely, extremely clear. Because that's going to help drive a lot of the communication outwardly and also help garnish some of that support internally. If you haven't already, start collecting data. So start thinking about what information do you have, what information would be helpful, where can you find that information, who can help you get that information, but just making a plan. We're going to talk a little bit today about contingency and risk management planning. In order to do that really well, data is a central point. So making sure that you have data as well. We talked about that sphere of influence. So an action step here is to really put some clear definition as to what is within the sphere of influence. So take some time to really determine, here is what we can do, and make sure that's put into a process or a step of here's where we're going to make sure to focus some time and energy and efforts. If you haven't already, take a look at, assess, update, determine what is your communication and marketing strategy right now, because this is going to be sort of how you show up in your face in the world. So it's really important to make sure it's tied back to some of those components we've talked about earlier. And then definitely seek new and different ways of doing things. So we've touched on this quite a bit today, but where is there the opportunity? Where is there innovation? Where is there collaboration? So looking for those entry points for positive change can help think about new and different ways that maybe are more effective than they used to be. All right, so we're going to take off our organization hat and focus on for people and for leaders. So this is really on the individualized level, some tips. Staying informed. So do your best to stay up to date with events that you can participate in, trainings that you can participate in. Do your best to anticipate any potential changes in order to make sure that you're using trustworthy news sources that are giving you the best up-to-date information. With that being said, I'll also caution, right, that you're maybe allotting a certain portion of time during the day to stay informed, because it's really easy to get sucked down that rabbit hole right now. So making sure that maybe you're setting a little bit of time or time allotment or prioritization of your day of, okay, I'm going to spend, an hour every day in order to stay informed, but then I'm going to move on to other things to make sure that it's not becoming all encompassing or all consuming. Look for learning opportunities for yourself professionally. So is there new knowledge and skills that might be required to adapt and succeed? Is there a new way of trying some things? How can I develop myself, my mindset, my personal skills, my professional skills, in order to sort of seek ways to show up in a way that's productive and supportive for others? This is a really big one, and I've seen a lot of beautiful examples right now about how people are practicing self-care. So putting into place healthy boundary setting and making sure that you're taking breaks and engage in activities that you enjoy. That's really important. So for myself, I'm really focusing on making sure to put into my calendar when I'm going to take breaks during the day. And I actively put effort into doing one thing every day that brings me an enormous amount of joy or excitement, to make sure that I'm practicing my self-care and bringing things that still make my heart filled with happiness and laughter and joy, which quite often results in extra time with my children or my fur babies. But your physical and your mental health are really important right now, and I can't stress that enough. That there's a variety of ways to go about doing that. So now is a great time to start thinking about what you can put in place to start taking care of yourself. And as part of those self-care ideas or concepts that you might be starting to implement, think about how you can surround yourself with a support system. So building trusting relationships can really help to foster resilience. So maybe it's just someone you're regularly checking in with once a week. That's a safe and trusted person in your life. Or something that works really well for me is I like to share my joyful moments. So if something makes me smile during the day, I capture a little picture and send it to people I love throughout the day, just to try and stay connected and to stay grounded. Focus on your goals. So if you have had time to think about what is the bigger picture in my life, what are the goals and objectives that I'm seeking on a personal level, this is a great time to start trying to minimize distractions from that and realigning ourselves to what is my place in the world, and how can I make sure that this is in alignment with the future direction that I personally would like to go, in order to minimize, if there are things that are popping up that are distracting you from that, you can sort of recenter yourself and focus back on your goals. Staying grounded and being in the present moment is a really great way to start thinking about how to personally manage change. So that can mean practicing mindfulness, looking for those joyous activities, making sure that you're staying grounded, and what can I do in this time, in this day, in this week, and trying to catch yourself when you're thinking too far down the pipeline in that forward future momentum and trajectory, that this is what is happening now. This was what's in my element of control now. And I'm going to put some intention on doing some mindfulness to kind of calm some of the fears and anxieties and really focus on where is the joy of my life, and to make sure I'm doing some of those activities for myself. If you don't already, think about implementing a gratitude routine. So I'll give you a favorite example of something that we're doing in our family, is we do what's the best part of our day every night when we eat dinner together, and each person in the family goes around the table and talks about what was the bright spot of their day. And that is something that has really given us an opportunity to have a sense of optimism and positivity, as well as connection and relationship building with one another, to continue to focus on what are the positive aspects in your life right now, and how can we make sure that on a regular basis we're practicing some gratitude. Another thing to think about would be establishing a routine. So if you're not a super scheduled person, or even if you are, thinking about how can you put a schedule together to make sure that you're shutting off at night in time to get enough sleep, that you're making sure to get enough activity and movement to the day, that maybe you're setting an intention to home make a meal, making time to go outdoors or socialization, whatever it is that makes you feel joy and excitement, establishing a routine that can sort of center around that. Like, yes, we have to get things done. Yes, we have tasks and responsibilities, but how can we maintain a routine and maintain a schedule that puts that mental and physical health at the forefront of that? Being kind to yourself and to others right now. And man, I gotta be honest with you, I have seen a lot on social media lately. And I just set the intention of like, this is not healthy for me. It's not making me feel good about myself or the place in the world. And so I'm gonna take a break. And I'm just going to take a break. It doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I'm not present or want to be well informed. It just means that I want to take a break from that constant messaging that's come through in order to make sure that I'm doing my self-care, I'm practicing my gratitude, and then when I'm ready to re-show up in the world, I'm doing it from a place of kindness to others and kindness to myself. Because how we treat others and how we talk to ourselves is really important right now. So thinking about how you can use languaging and wording that really focuses on compassion and empathy and kindness can help foster that connection and help you reclaim your power for how you want to show up in the world. Embrace the not knowing. I am admittedly like a type A product of being an oldest child. And so this is a really difficult one for me because I like to have a plan and I like to know where I'm going, and have really sunk into that, especially after COVID and being a new mother, about, you know, this is something that's just an expected part of life. Change is always going to happen. When we release that pressure of needing the answers constantly and sort of surrender into embracing the not knowing, there can be a lot of power that comes back to you in that. All right, so here's our fun little action steps to add to your toolbox. If you're not already, make sure to pick, you know, just a couple of things that are really resonating with you to stay informed and follow some trustworthy news sources and time box it. Do one thing or activity a day that brings you joy and excitement, and schedule it in for yourself and do your best to not compromise that regardless of all of the other things that might be going on in the world. Define your daily and your weekly routine. What would you like for that to look like for yourself? And to create sort of some consistency in how you're unfolding the present moment. Think about one gratitude practice that you can put into place per day that would really help you reflect on the positivity in your life and where are you personally having your bright spots. And then the last piece of this, I've touched on a little bit, but really start thinking about how you can prioritize your days. So when we think about our joy and excitement, when we think about our self-care, when we think about staying informed, really, how can you prioritize all of the things that you need and want to get done in your day and kind of start a list? So if you haven't already, I would really highly recommend a book called Eat That Frog. And it really talks about, like, we will always have a list of things that we need or want to get done. And so how can we look at that list and prioritize them and interweave those components of self-care and joyous activities in order to keep ourselves grounded? All right. Any questions or reflections so far? I don't want to just like talk at you the whole time. So before we talk about contingency planning and risk management, any reflection or anyone want to volunteer sort of thoughts on that? Hopefully you guys are still with me. Yes? Okay. No, I just want to find the book. Okay, awesome. Yeah, eat that pumpkin. And they made a second one too. All right, so let's talk a little bit about contingency planning and risk management. So if you haven't already, start thinking about creating a plan C. I would create our plan B, a plan C, a plan D, E, F, however many you need to sort of think through. But this is really where we start thinking about what strategies can you put in place in order to have some different contingency outcomes really well defined. Ideally, plans should be big picture. They should assess and address the risks that could impact the entire department. Or if there's multiple projects that are in place, I'm really thinking through and analyzing those. Contingency planning is really a way to think about staying ahead of the game. These are all scenarios of things that might happen. They're not guaranteed to happen. But what's really nice about putting a little bit of time and energy and effort towards that is it gives you back the power that if one of these things were to occur, this is how we're going to react. And so it puts a little bit more of being proactive rather than reactive back into your hands to make sure that you're staying ahead of the different scenarios that could play out. Alongside contingency planning is looking at ways to do risk assessments. So there's some great templates and some great processes that are out there, but looking at ways to think about risks, how to evaluate their impact is really a valuable use of time right now, and to think about risk and crisis management because it unfolds into a lot of this change management planning. So just making sure to take the time to assess the risk and put it as a component of your contingency planning. All right, so I have talked a lot and I would love to hear from you. Again, the wealth of the knowledge is in this room with us today. We've covered a lot, so I would love to hear from folks. I tried to give you some examples from myself, but what are you personally doing to manage uncertainty? What are you professionally doing? Do you have any tips that maybe you've put into place that I did or didn't cover today, or some examples that you'd be willing to share? So any brave folks willing to participate in some connection and conversation?
I raised my hand, Ashley, but I don't know if you saw it.
You're good. Yep, I see it now.
Oh,
Thanks.
okay. Okay, so what I'm doing personally to manage uncertainty, I know this is hard to say, but to release the uncontrollables.
Mhm.
You were talking about the self-care and just processing change, and for me, I can't hold on to those things I cannot control. So planning is, ingrained in the work and personally in my life, but I'm learning to let go of the things that I can't control. So that's something I'm doing personally. Professionally, to manage uncertainty, um, including elements of contingency. So, and again, in the professional, I'm also letting go in ways. I think I'm a person that I will just dig in if something doesn't get done, but I'm also um, working with my team more to just rely on them for certain things. They have so many gifts and skills, and most of our talent is already, whatever we need is typically already in the room. So being able to work as a team and come together like that, even when there is uncertainty professionally, I think it lifts up our strength. Not to overwork us, but to just maneuver and lean into each other where it's needed. And what are your tips if there's limited time to prepare? Communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yeah,
'Cause if
right?
you at least share that part with the group, organization, whoever you're working with, they can at least start to absorb what has to be done. So that's all.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate your bravery. All right, we've got another hand up. It's like Allie.
Hi, Shalandra, I agree with all the things you just said, so I just will add a little echo to those. Personally, a lot of the work around self-care has been really important for me to make sure that I can show up to whatever space I'm in the best way I can. And so for me, that looks like getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, and eating in a way that fuels me. So those are like sort of my trifecta. And if I feel like things are getting out of whack, those are like my touchstones, and I like to go back to those to help me show up in whether it's work or personally. Professionally, I think I'm leaning into like the interconnectedness that feels like it's becoming more and more required as of late, of making sure I'm in communication with other people in similar fields and industries, and making sure we're all talking and being able to lean on each other. And then my time limited tip is triage, and that everything doesn't have to get done, but what is the most important thing? And then when that's done, what is the next most important thing? And focusing on those.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Any others? Come on, I know there's got to be others. Anyone else brave to kind of share what you're personally doing or what you're professionally doing, or some other tips you might have for the group? Concept of triage. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I'll move us on, but if you feel more comfortable using the chat box to maybe plop some things in, feel free to do that. All right, so here's our key takeaways for today of what I'm hoping you really come away with, is that change is hard, but it's always constant. So a plan, tools, tips, techniques can make it easier to the best of your ability, and is a valuable use of your time to do so. Change really starts with you. So if you think about how you're showing up in the world, whether that be your attitude or the way that you're communicating, or maybe it's the way that you're outwardly reflecting to others that you're taking care of yourself. This can really help you feel like you're back into the element of what is in your control, to make sure, right, that you're lifting that confidence level, you're prepared, and you're in support of how things are moving forward, even though you may not be super excited about it. Participation is key. So make sure at all levels, we've talked about this. I don't have any other English language words to spatter at you to really stress the importance of that. Participation is key. Involve everyone that you can. Regularly assess and get feedback about the way that your communication is being released. And to keep revisiting that is definitely important. Look for new ways to motivate. So again, use like your change management group or a committee, or it could be a group of folks that have already come together to think about how can we reduce resistance by maybe new professional development opportunities. Maybe there's a way to reward others. And then to the best of your ability, continue to find those bright spots, find them personally, find them professionally, looking at ways to train, share, and repeat in a solutions-oriented and solutions-focused way, what is working. So if you want to take a moment on your piece of paper, if you started with us today, did you meet your learning targets? And then most importantly, your call to action. So what are some next steps and reflection that you can do after taking this training? How can you share this information back to folks that you work with and support. So how can we make this something that's really meaningful and really actionable for you today as a conclusion? And so while you're working on that, or if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat box what your next steps are, I'm going to share with you this beautiful little quote. I like to end all of my trainings with a quote, and it is that it is not the strongest or the most intelligent that will survive, but it's those that can best manage change. Before we go to questions and reflections, I did add these in, and I want to make sure to highlight it because I know folks might need to jump off. These are linked in the slides, so hopefully you will be able to get them, but there is a risk assessment for federal funding that the National Council has come out with. MNA has a political climate response planning guide that they've released. Minnesota has released resources for uncertainty. And then I'd love to know if there's others in the group or others known by the group, if you could put those in the chat box for people, or North Carolina, if you know of others that might be helpful right now, if we can just readily share that information outwards, that would be great. So please be sure to put that in the chat box. And again, these are linked. I also put together a resources and references link here. So if you're just looking for some research paper and articles, or if you're looking for a new book, in addition to Eat That Frog, I would recommend Switch, which is one of my favorite books, and it sits by my desktop, which is How to Change Things When Change is Hard. So I would highly recommend that. All right, so I'm going to open it up for kind of some questions and reflection, additional conversation. This is my own personal quote that I live by, which is the greatest success one can have is supporting the success of others. So I thank you for spending the time with me today. If there's absolutely anything I can do to share my skills, gifts, talents, and passions with you, I would be most grateful. So any questions or reflections from the group? Okay, a little quiet. Thank you. This is needed. You're so welcome. Oh, good. I'm glad you like the quote. So there's a comment. The quote is something I strongly agree with. You're most welcome.
Thank you for the different resources that you gave towards that last slide there.
Yeah, absolutely. And please do plop those in if you know of others or if I missed of any. I feel like I'm subscribing to 10 or 10 different nonprofit associations, weekly newsletters, just like monitoring for everything that I can get my hands on. So if you're not subscribed to those, would recommend. There's some beautiful, wonderful, supportive things coming out. Any others? Or questions or reflections?
Well, the resources are very helpful, so thank you. Yeah, I'm looking in the chat for you, Ashley.
Okay, great.
Communicating through the chat.
And I would say your feedback is really important to me, so I can only improve on content and resources as much as you share with me what it was that resonated with you or was really meaningful or what you took away from it. And if there's opportunities for improvement or areas of focus, maybe to not spend too much time and energy on, please be sure to share that with me in your feedback, because that only helps make this work better for all involved. Okay, awesome. I'll pass it back to you, like Lisa. Becca, anything else on your end or anything you want to add?
Not at the moment, but thank you. I think this information was great because I definitely think it's useful, relatable, and most timely. Let me say that with everything that's going on in the world today. So thank you again. And thank you, Center Team, for administering and hosting the Zoom and checking the chat for us. I want to remind the group, please take a moment to complete the webinar survey. I believe the link has been put into the chat for you. An additional reminder as I go through the center, if you'd like to become a member of the center, we're also adding a link for member benefits. Again, you're getting discounts to resources, and going back to what Ashley referenced in terms of timely newsletters and updates from our legal and advocacy department has been very useful. And also look out for the wraparound email with the recording included. So we're giving you, what, 20-something minutes back to your day? Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely. Take those extra few minutes and do something nice for yourself or others.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.